pulling everything that is in this pile out of this pile. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Evelyn, and today we're doing something I've never done on my channel before. It's the mid-year book freakout tag. 2020 is halfway over. It feels like nothing has happened, but also like it's been way longer than half a year. So I just spent a lot of time going through all the books that I've read this year, and it's more than I thought. I have 23 books marked as read this year on Goodreads, but I know I'm bad at marking books on Goodreads. I've read a lot more than that, especially if you count in books that I've read for class. In the second half of the year, I'm gonna try to keep a reading journal and make sure that I have every book that I read put up on Goodreads so that I can actually not forget book. I often forget the titles of books that I've read, and then when I want to go back and talk about them on the channel, I can't remember what they were called, and it's a struggle. Trying to become a better booktuber, yay! Question number 1 is, what is the best book you've read so far in 2020? And I had to narrow it down to one fiction and one nonfiction because I had to read several nonfiction books for class, and I am starting a thing where I'm trying to read at least one nonfiction book a month. So for my fiction book, I picked You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This is a young adult contemporary novel. The main character, Liz Leidy, is one of only 2, I believe, black students at her very affluent white high school. She dreams of following in her mother's footsteps and going to college, but when one of her scholarships falls through, she knows that her grandparents, who've been raising her and her younger brother ever since their mother passed away, are going to try to sell their house if she doesn't come up with the money some other way. Now, at her school, prom is a really, really huge deal. So much so, in fact, that the prom king and queen every year win a scholarship which is around the same amount of money that she would have gotten through that music scholarship she was trying to get. So Liz and her friends decide that she's going to run for prom queen, but she is definitely not the kind of person who wins in these sort of competitions. She's not popular, she's quiet, she's not white or blonde or straight, and so she is going to have to put in a lot of effort to be able to win. But at the same time, Liz has begun to fall for one of the other girls who is running for prom queen, which is a very big risk when it comes to life in a small town. People don't want their prom queen kissing another girl. I adore this book so freaking much, and I cried reading it a lot, which is a good thing. I think that things that make me cry I like better than if they hadn't made me cry, and so I was crying during certain scenes because of how seen I felt by the story. I am very white, but I grew up as a LGBT person in a small town. I was out to my friends, but I wasn't out because I had the luxury of being able to just not talk about it. And so some of the scenes and conversations that happen between Liz and the people in her life who she loves are just wonderful. And all of the relationships, even the platonic relationships and the familial relationships in that story, are so well fleshed out. I've noticed that sometimes in young adult contemporary especially, a lot of the side characters feel more like props than actual characters, but that didn't feel this way. Every character who was a part of Liz's story impacted her, or you found out there was more than meets the eye about them, just like there's more than meets the eye about Liz herself. and I don't know, it was just so well written and lovely and like positive and wonderful. My nonfiction book is less so. In The Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, I was lucky enough to get to hear her read an excerpt of this book. She came to Iowa City, where I go to school, and where she did her master's program. And actually a lot of the book is set in Iowa City. It is a memoir about her experience in an abusive same-sex relationship. And it's told through these little vignettes, and she explores several different styles of writing. I couldn't afford to buy her book at the time when I went to her reading, and so they were handing out free bookmarks, and I asked her if she would sign the bookmark because I wanted to buy the book someday and then I could put the bookmark in it. And she laughed and said, we've all been there, and signed it for me. And so I finally, I've had it on hold through the Iowa City Public Library for a hot second. I finally got my hands on the ebook and read it this month, and it's so good and so moving and haunting, and just like, she can write and she can adapt, and wow, if you're like a writing person, like, she's one of my favorite people I've discovered through school. So, question number 2 is, what is the best sequel you've read so far in 2020? I could not narrow this down because I've finished so many series that I legitimately have loved for like years, some of them. We'll start with The King of Crows, which was the final book in Libba Bray's Diviners series. That's a paranormal historical fantasy series set in the 1920s. It follows a group of children, teenagers, who all have these supernatural abilities, and they band together to fight against ghosts. Then we have The Deck of Omens by Christine Lynn Herman. That was the sequel to The Devouring Grey, a duology that's set in the town of Four Paths, New York, and the 5 main characters are the descendants of the 4 founders of the town, and they've inherited these magical abilities, and they're supposed to protect the town from this dark, evil force that's threatening it. And that one's really fun. It's more of a contemporary fantasy story, and again, a little bit spooky, but like in the best sort of way. And I'm a wimp, and I could handle those. So that's a really great duology. I keep forgetting to hold up the books because I actually have them with me now. When I was in Iowa, I didn't necessarily have the books. So this is The Deck of Omens, and then I also have My Calamity Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Joni Meadows, also known as the Lady Janies. This is the 3rd book in the Janes series. They're not sequels, they are like companion novels. So My Lady Jane tells this real story behind Lady Jane Grey, who was Queen of England for a little bit before she got beheaded and Bloody Mary took over. But in this version, there are shapeshifters and animal magic. And there's My Plain Jane, which is Jane Eyre with even more ghosts. And this is My Calamity Jane, which tells the story of Calamity Jane, famous Wild West. She used a bullwhip, and she was part of Wild Bill's Wild West. What's it called? I should know this. Wild Bill's traveling show. It was like her, and then like Annie Oakley, like Annie Get Your Gun, Annie Oakley, and Frank Butler. And those are the 3 point of view characters. They were part of this Wild West show. And this is set during those like cowboy times, right? Which is fun because like cowboy culture is big in Oklahoma. In this version of events, they are not only performers, they're also werewolf hunters, which is real fun. This is the first of the Jane's books that has like LGBT representation in it, which is really great, and I wasn't expecting it. I was very excited by that. I also just really loved Annie as a character. I like any version of Annie Oakley. There are a lot of Annie Get Your Gun jokes and references in here, and my theater kid heart was very happy. And then last is a book that is not out yet. It comes out at the end of this month, which is 10 Things I Hate About Pinky. I was lucky enough to get an arc of this book through Prairie Lights Books. I'm actually on Sanja Menon's street team. So this is the third and final book in the Dimpleverse. It's a companion novel to When Dimple Met Rishi and There's Something About Sweetie. It takes place after both of those, and it does feature characters that are introduced in those books, so I would recommend reading them in order. So not only is Sanja one of my favorite contemporary authors, but she's also just a really lovely person to work with. I've been in the street team since March, and she's just really fun, and she tells us a lot of stuff about like her process writing and like how different author opportunities are coming about for her, which is really cool for me since I want to be a young adult author. Like, being able to get information about that from someone who's actually doing it is really great. This is one of my favorite like go-to like summary rom-com romance series. So I read this book in like a day. I was so like invested in these two characters specifically. I wouldn't call them enemies to lovers, but if you like rivals to lovers sort of things, or like opposites attract, then I think you'll really enjoy this book, but also all of the Dimpleverse books. Oh, and this has a fake dating trope. Question number 3 is a new release that you have not read yet but want to. There are so many. I did an entire series of videos back in January, and I will be doing again in July on anticipated releases this year, and I have 2 of them that I just checked out from the Iowa City Public Library's virtual branch. So I have The Dark Tide by Alicia Jancinko and When We Were Magic by Sarah Gailey, and I'm gonna start reading those soon. Question number 4 is my most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and hands down that has to be Among the Beast and Briars by Ashley Poston. So if y'all don't know, Ashley Poston is one of my favorite authors, hands down, ever, and she has proven so far to be a very versatile writer. So I first read her Once Upon a Khan books, Geekerella and The Princess and the Fangirl, and Bookish and the Beast releases later this year as well. And I am rereading currently the first book in her sci-fi series, Heart of Iron, and then I have Soul of Stars back here that I'm gonna pick up when I finish that. And I love both of those series. One of them is like contemporary YA romance, the other is like sci-fi, like misfits in a spaceship. Those are 2 very different genres, and she handles both of them very well. Neither one of those genres is my favorite genre though. By far, I love fantasy the most, and Among the Beast and Briars is her first fantasy book, and it has a fox in it, which I love foxes, and so I'm just all around very, very much anticipating this book, and I can't wait. So my biggest disappointment this year, honestly, like half of the books that I had to read for class, I didn't really like most of what I read in Foundations of the English Major, but I also wasn't necessarily expecting to like a lot of what I read in Foundations of the English Major. What I did feel sad about though was I took a Shakespeare course this semester, and we read a bunch of Shakespeare plays, and I thought that I would like Othello, and I didn't like Othello. Everyone's like, oh, isn't it so tragic, the ending? And I'm like, well, you know, seems like maybe you could have trusted women and all of that would have been avoided. Question number 6 was biggest surprise, and that has to be the Check Please graphic novel. This is book 2, Sticks and Scones. This just released in physical format back in April, but it is all a webcomic online originally. And so this is a graphic novel that follows this guy, Eric Biddle. He is a vlogger, he does baking videos, and he is also a member of the Samuel University men's hockey team. And it's a really fun found family story, and Biddle is the first openly gay member of the team, and so there's lots of hijinks that incur, and also a very adorable romance that, like, my poor heart could not handle the ending of the first book, which, like, if you know, you know, right? Question 7 is your favorite new author, and hands down that has to be Leah Johnson. You Should See Me in a Crown was, like, not even really on my radar, and then I saw Leah talk on a panel during the Y'all Stay Home book festival, and she was just so cool, and just a lot of the things she said about, like, why she told the story she wanted to tell, and, like, were just, like, they spoke to me, because it was like, oh, that's why I want to write too. So she specifically, as a Black queer woman, was talking about how she wanted girls like her to be able to read her book and know that, like, she loves them and that she wrote that book for them. And I was like, wow, because that's why I want to write, specifically I want to write fantasy with queer characters, because every time that I read in that genre and there are characters like me in that genre, I feel seen. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, she gets it. She gets, like, the importance, which, like, obviously she gets it, but, so I was like, oh, I want to read her book, and so I put a hold on it, I got it, I read it in a day, I absolutely adored it, and I've gone to 2 other events that she's done, like virtual events she's done this month, and every time she speaks, I'm just, there are very few, like a very small handful of authors that I admire and also have been able to interact with and realize, oh, like, this is a person who is like me. Not even just like, oh, they read, they write, but like, oh, we have, like, other things that are meaningful to us that we share, and, like, this person, if I told them this thing about me, they would understand it. Not only did I read their book and it meant something to me, but also I can listen to them speak and I feel understood by the things that they're saying, and they live up to the magic that I found within the pages of their stories. And so it's authors like Leah Johnson and Ashley Poston and Sunshine Menon and Frances Harding. I've only read one of her books, but she was another author that I saw on a panel, and she was talking, it was like, oh my gosh, your brain works so beautifully. I'm very glad that even though the current situation is awful, it has created accessibility within the community in terms of, like, if coronavirus had not happened, I would not have known that Leah Johnson was an author that I could trust and relate to on a personal level. I could have, like, read her tweets, but it's not the same. It was like hearing the way that her voice sounds when she talks about the things that she's passionate about that I'm also passionate about. Like, that's something that would never have happened because I can't afford to go to California, right? And so I think that's one good thing about this year that I can hold on to, is that I was able to, you know, like, be part of these things in a way that I wouldn't have gotten to do if they weren't online this year. Question 8, newest fictional crush. So in the book that I'm reading currently, which is Camp by Elsie Rosen, the main character, Randy, is a theater kid, and he shares a cabin at this queer summer camp that he goes to with a bunch of other theater kids. One of his best friends at this camp is a demisexual lesbian stage manager named Ashley, and I am kind of aging out of being able to, like, comfortably be like, fictional crush when it comes to young adult stuff, but when I was their age, which is 16, I was a theater kid, and I was specifically a dancer slash student choreographer, and so I just feel like me and Ashley could have been, like, a really cool theater power couple. And also she's just, like, funny and sarcastic, and, like, I really love her as a character. And so, but mostly I just wish that I'd gone to a summer camp like this. I haven't finished it, so I can't tell you whether or not I like the ending, but so far I'm vibing with it. Question number 9 is, who is your new favorite character? And Liz Leidy. Liz Leidy from You Should See Me in a Crown. Question 10, a book that made you cry. For this, I'm actually going to say Field Notes on Love by Jennifer E. Smith. So in this book, the two main characters go on a cross-country train journey together. They are complete and total strangers at the beginning of this trip. In fact, Hugo just broke up with his longtime girlfriend, and he is from the UK. He is one of a famous set of sextuplets, and so he is going on this trip to try and, like, clear his mind and, like, figure out what he wants, because he's about to start university, but he's not sure that's what he actually wants to do. Like I said, his girlfriend just broke up with him. She was supposed to be going on this trip with him too, and the tickets are in her name. So he needs to find a girl who has the same name as her to show her ID so they can get onto the train, and that's where May comes in. She is trying to get into a film program at her school, but she's been rejected because her film was too impersonal. So she's trying to do a film project, which immediately I was like, ooh, I like this, because I did video production for 2 years in high school, and I do YouTube. I cried really hard at the end of this book, and I was not expecting to, because I don't think I've ever cried at a Jennifer E. Smith book before. She does a lot of, like, weird travel stories, I've noticed, because the first book that I read from her was The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight, which takes place mostly on an airplane. That didn't make me cry, though. I was not expecting to cry. I think this is my favorite Jennifer E. Smith book that I've read. Number 11 is a book that made you happy. I would have to say, actually, By the Book by Amanda Sellett. So the main character, Mary Porter Malcolm, has been going to this private school all her life, and she's a sophomore and the school closes, so now she's having to go into public school. She is the daughter of 2 college professors, and her family is very literate, and she, in particular, likes reading, like, classic Victorian novels, and she's read a lot of them. Her friends from her old school kind of immediately abandon her when they get to the actual real high school setting, and she's not sure how she's gonna survive, but she overhears a group of girls talking about this boy that she knows who asked one of them out, and she knows that he is a scoundrel. And so she goes over and says, no, he's a scoundrel, and he's exactly like this book character. And they're like, oh my gosh, this girl knows everything there is to know about relationships because she's read a bunch of Victorian literature. She becomes friends with these girls, and she starts helping them create this scoundrel survival guide, where she warns people about different kinds of guys based on different kinds of guys in literature. And at the same time, they're helping her have, like, the quintessential high school experience. The only issue is that she is maybe developing feelings for this boy who is the OG scoundrel, but maybe he's not so bad after all. This is something that I literally do with my friends. I don't have real life relationship experience, so whenever they're like, hey, I have this boy problem or girl problem or whatever problem, I'll be like, well, you know, I think based on this fictional situation, perhaps you should do something like this. In fact, I have a video on this channel. If I remember to, I'll put a little tag that is my relationship rules based off of different fictional couples. And that's the advice that I give my friends over and over, so I made it into a little list. It's on here on this channel. So when I saw that this book was a thing, I knew that I had to read it because I'm such a Mary Porter Malcolm, as it turns out. Question 12 is the most beautiful book that you have hauled, and who have I bought this year? So there are 2 books on my shelf that I've received this year that I think are really pretty. First we have Butterfly Yellow. This was gifted to me. I don't really know what it's about, but it is a National Book Award and Newbery Honor winner, which is why it was gifted to me. And it's just so pretty. Look at that. Look at that cover. I should read this soon. And then, of course, The Devouring Grey. I grabbed this one because just all of the details about this book are beautiful. Like the cover, first of all, this blue, like shiny trees, but then also the end papers have trees on them, and then, hello, the chapter headings. Each part has like a tarot inspired, well, it's cards from the deck of omens, which is sort of based off of tarot. So just like all of the little details in this book make it so beautiful. And I mean, the deck of omens is also gorgeous, but it doesn't have, it just has colored in papers, but it does still have the fun illustrated elements. So this duology, like all of the details in the books physically themselves, plus all the details and like the atmosphere of the writing, they're beautiful, beautiful books. Last but not least, question 13, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? There are a lot of anticipated books that are on my list that release this year. I've talked about a few of them, and I am planning on reading those by the end of the year, but I don't feel like I need to read them by the end of the year. What I do need to do is read all the unread books on my bookshelf. This wonderful stack here. So, at the top we have, like I said, Butterfly Yellow, then The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. He actually came to Iowa back in October to read from his new release and signed some copies of his books for the English Society, and when I won their writing contest, I won this signed copy of The Book Thief, but I've never read The Book Thief, so I need to read it, because signed copy. I hope I like it. Then we have Soul of Stars by Ashley Poston. Winterwood by Shay Earnshaw. I got this through Owlcrate, and then I got trapped in my dorm room, so I never read it. Actually, the rest of these are all Owlcrate books that got trapped in my dorm room, so I never read them. House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig. The Guinevere Deception by Kirsten White. I Hope You Get This Message by Farah Naz Rishi. And Crier's War by Nina Varela. I'll probably start with this one because it is my most anticipated out of all of these. I'm also really looking forward to House of Salt and Sorrows because it is a retelling, and y'all know I love a good retelling. I am planning on reading lots more new releases as well, but these are the books I feel like I need to read by the end of 2020 because if I don't like them, I would like to unhaul them. Also, all of them are signed except this one. I always feel weird unhauling signed copies of things because I don't just want to donate it. So if anyone's interested in me doing a book unhaul video and then like I could send people the books as long as you paid for shipping, maybe I'll do that, because I did get rid of some when I reorganized my bookshelves. Video coming at you soon. So there we have it. I freaked out. It's the middle of the year. If you liked this video and you want to see more from my channel, please remember to click that subscribe button and also ring that bell icon so you can be notified whenever I upload a new video. With that being said, my name is Evelyn. I make new videos every magical Monday, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.